Hey guys, my name is Grim. Today I'm talking about Stamina Nightblade in the Dragonhold patch, and we're going to talk about some changes to the meta, how I have adapted to those changes, the sets I'm running, sets I like, sets I don't like, the abilities, then like potions, poisons, CP, and that'll be it. No gameplay this time because I just released a gameplay video, so I'll link that at the end in case you want to see the exact build and setup that I'm talking about in action and how I play it and why. So, should be kind of fun. This has been a really fun patch so far. Performance actually seems kind of down, which is a bummer from last patch, but the balance itself is a lot more fun, has been more fun for me at least. So, what's changed? The dot meta is over. They've nerfed a bunch of dots, and as a result, people are focusing more on burst damage, and oddly enough, tankiness has gone up. So people are building more tanky and sacrificing some damage to get some extra health, some extra tankiness, and it just seems like the fights I'm getting are a lot of tanks, or a lot of really tough people that don't do a lot of damage. And I'm okay with that. That's fine. So basically, the way I deal with that is by trading off defense and going higher damage. And high damage playstyles are a lot of fun. So there are obviously several ways that you can do that this patch, and I'm going to talk about the way I do it. So the goal is to have really high damage and put on a ton of pressure, and to be able to deal with tanks by being tough enough that I will have options and opportunities to sit in their damage and like be able to tank them a little bit. But that's not too hard because, you know, they're tanks, so they don't do much damage. But I want to be strong enough and have enough recovery and enough defense to be able to sit and take the damage that I need to take to get off the kill, but also be elusive and fast and all the things that a Nightblade is for when I'm outnumbered or need to move around. So how have I gained more damage? First of all, I switched out some stats, I shuffled some things around, and I'm not willing to give up recovery. So my recovery is actually exactly the same as last patch. If we take a look here at my character sheet, oh yeah, actually that's without food. Hold on, let's put on my food. So you'll notice I changed foods, and I'll talk about that too. But so now my buffed recovery is 2184 on my front bar, and it's actually also 2484 on my back bar right. Or, whoa. It's not? Oh, 2184. I'm sorry. I was thinking 2484. So it's 2184 with minor endurance. Minor endurance comes from rally. Oddly enough, it still doesn't give you the green cloud, which would be great because I don't like the green cloud, except for that you still get it from relentless. It's so stupid. But minor endurance comes from rally now. So buffed 2184. I'm not willing to go lower than that. And that's kind of where my recovery sits. So unbuffed, it's like 2k. So what do I do to get more damage? So my recovery is actually exactly the same as my last build. So what I did is I kept my recovery the same by adding in Lavafoot, Soup, and Saltress, which gives you max stam and stamina recovery. That's going to be down here. I had to take off inventory grid view because it was causing issues. So I have a list now. It sucks. So max stam and stamina recovery. So I got a ton of stamina recovery, and that allowed me to switch my Mundus to the warrior, which I don't usually do, but that's what we're doing. And then it also allowed me to switch one of my recovery glyphs to infused weapon damage. So now I have more damage because I'm running an infused weapon damage, another infused weapon damage, and then one stamina cost reduction. And this is really useful because the cost reduction does a lot of work. It really pulls its weight because it reduces the cost of everything. Rolling, bashing. It does not reduce the cost of blocking, so keep that in mind. But rolling and bashing, it does. So when you're doing like light attack, surprise attack, bash, you're doing two abilities in one global cooldown in 1 second, essentially. And so you can basically get, 1200 stamina recovery equivalent if you are spamming abilities and doing like a light attack, surprise attack, bash combo in someone's face. So when you're attacking, it really saves you a lot of stamina. And then when you're defending, stamina recovery is still fine. So I don't find myself having to employ a playstyle where I back up or have to like pull in and out of combat too much because of recovery. I'll do it because I'm taking damage or being pressured or I'm trying to kite, but I don't have to do it for my sustain necessarily. So that's nice. I like being able to take opportunities that are presented. If someone messes up and makes a mistake, I want to be able to be ready to capitalize. And if I have low stamina, I can't do that. So cost reduction, really great. And so I was able to keep my stamina recovery the same and put on more damage. To get the rest of my recovery, I gave up some raw defense. So to do that, I switched out Troll King, which is a fantastic defensive set and much stronger defensively than Bloodspawn. But Bloodspawn gives you stamina recovery, so I was able to use that to help keep my stamina recovery the same. And it will also make me more offensive by giving me more ultimate regeneration. And that's kind of a big deal. It's not that big a deal. It's helpful. It is noticeable, but it's not that big a deal. I feel like Bloodspawn isn't necessarily a better set than Troll King, but it is very good, and it provides a lot of utility, a lot of tools, and so I've been using this patch. Plus, it's a lot of fun. I've always liked the effect of it. I like turning into a rock. Sue me. It's cool. So let's see. Didn't lose recovery. I reduced my max resources by changing my Mundus and food. I'm not using tri-stat food anymore, and I'm not using the serpent anymore. So I lost those stats, and I built some of the stats that are necessary back in through attributes. So you probably noticed that I'm running 21 points in health and 43 in stamina, and that's to get sort of the bare minimum health that I feel that I need, which outside of Cyrodiil is around 17.7k, 18k on the back bar because I've got more shadow abilities. I've got 2 shadow abilities instead of just 1. And so that's a little buff to my health on the back bar, which isn't good. I tend to like to have them the same, but it is what it is. I need the abilities, so my health bar changes from bar to bar, and that's fine, I guess. But I had to build that health back in using this because I'm not getting it from my food anymore, and that's fine. I don't want to use Dubious because the stat pool that Dubious gives you just is not very good, and so I'd rather specialize and run the bare minimum that I need in order to survive and focus everything on damage. That's the goal. So what sets am I using? First I'm going to talk about the sets that I'm using, then I'm going to talk about other sets I like, and then the ones that I don't like so much. And for different reasons. I'll try and explain everything as clearly as I can. So I'm actually using, generally speaking, the same sets. Obviously I switched to Bloodspawn, but I'm still using Poisonous Serpent, probably my favorite set in the game. Very underrated. A lot of people don't realize how good this is. It was changed almost a year ago, so that the proc chance and the damage were adjusted to make it so that it has a 50% chance every light attack, and that's really good chances. When you're pressuring someone, you have a really high chance of getting just a crazy burst. The amount of damage that it adds is so much, and since it can happen every global cooldown, it's really a fantastic way to pressure people and to get really juicy burst combos. It's also fun because it does a lot of damage from range too. I double bar this set and I have it on my back bar as well, and it's just a hilarious way to kill people from range. It does a lot of pressure. So that's fun. It has max stam, weapon damage, max stam, which is a great 2 through 4 piece, especially because I'm running such low stamina already. And so with this, I'm able to, well, okay, so the reason that I have this on my 5 piece, another reason to double bar essentially is because then I don't lose the max stam when I bar swap, which I don't like. In exchange, that means that I'm running a set that has 2 max stam and 1 weapon damage on the front bar, and that's not the only reason. Spriggans is my front bar set. It's a great set. I really don't need it as much on the back bar as I do Poisonous Serpent. I like it much more, and then I run it on the front bar instead of Poisonous Serpent because then when I bar swap, I don't lose max stam, which would be a bummer, especially on the bow bar, which is the one that I need for my mobility and rolling around and sprinting, stuff like that. So I use a Sharpened Spriggan's Maul. Sharpened Mauls are still doing more damage against most people, especially since we're encountering a lot of tanky people. And if you do not find yourself encountering a ton of tanky people, sometimes Nirnhone might be better. If you're fighting a lot of light armor targets that have under 18k resistances, Nirnhone can outperform, and it will help your healing. But definitely, I prefer sharpened for the vast majority of situations, or at least the situations that I'm fighting in. Does a lot of damage. It also buffs Poisonous Serpent. Nirnhone does not buff the Poisonous Serpent proc, but since the Poisonous Serpent proc is resisted by resistance, cutting down resistance using penetration buffs it tremendously. So that's one of the reasons that I like Spriggans as well, is because it provides physical pen, and that helps Poisonous Serpent get through. A lot of people already know this if they've been following my builds for a while, because it's been basically the same build with just stats shuffled around it. So this patch, I'm running all Triglyphs because I really want to get my health as high as possible, and I actually need to get my Magicka as high as possible too, because I dropped Tri-Stat food, so I went from having like 18k max Magicka to having 13k, which is still fine, but you just have to be careful. But I'm fine with that. That's how I used to play, and now I'm playing like that again. I use double dot poisons on my front bar. They're really great. They do a ton of damage. They're great pressure, and they can also proc Poisonous Serpent. So you can actually get a Poisonous Serpent proc on the light attack that applies the damage health poison. So if you are hitting someone that doesn't already have a poison ability on them, and the damage health poison procs, you also have a chance to proc Poisonous Serpent, which is kind of fun. On the back bar, I'm using the Master's Bow, infused with disease damage. A lot of people still ask me why I don't use a weapon damage glyph on the back bar, and the main reason is because it's much harder to capitalize on a weapon damage glyph in open world. They don't last very long, and in order to get the equivalent of the disease damage, you really have to go in and actually hit a couple of abilities, and that's a lot to commit to. I really like being able to pressure people from range and force them to come into me, and this is just a great tool to be able to do so. It's also great at catching people who are running away from you, because it does a ton of damage. If you get like a light attack, Venom Arrow, light attack, you have a chance of getting like the Poisonous Serpent proc, the disease damage glyph. You know, you've got light attacks that can crit. You've got a dot on them. It's a lot of damage. So I really like having an infused disease damage glyph on the back bar. And then of course, when you have the Poison Arrow ability up on someone, it adds another 300 damage against them. So it's really useful. It's great. If you don't have a Master Bow, I would probably say use, like, you could use a Seducer Bow to get some magical recovery. You could use a bow that gives you resistance. You could use, what is it, the Potentate's Bow? That sounds wrong. I don't know. The 3-piece set that gives you, like, the 2-piece gives you 5% resistance against players. That's probably not going to be bad, but if you're a Nord, or, well, you probably shouldn't be a Nord anyways, but if you've got a bunch of other 5% mitigation buffs, it might not be ideal, so you might want to run with something that just gives you raw resistance. I think White Strikes gives you raw resistance. There are a couple. So those are all options. I would probably personally go with the Seducer Bow, because it's going to give you that magical recovery on your back bar, but if you have a Master's Bow, that's better. More damage is kind of the point anyways. So that's what I'm doing. Another set that I've been playing around with that I really enjoy but can't fully commit to is actually Essence Thief. Essence Thief is a really cool set, and it took me forever to farm, but here it is. Maul of the Essence Thief. Let's just compare it against my other set here. So it has the same 2 through 4 pieces Spriggans, which is pretty cool, because that means that when I weapon swap, I don't lose it on my back bar. And it's another weapon. It's a set that really is much more beneficial to have on a melee bar anyways, so I really don't feel like I'm losing anything when I don't have it on my back bar. But it's a very powerful effect. The 5 pieces that when you deal damage with a light attack, you draw essence from the enemy that pools near them for 5 seconds. Drawing from the pool heals you for almost 4k health and restores almost 4k stamina, and it increases your damage done by 10% for 10 seconds. It's a really strong buff, and the health and stamina that it gives you is fantastic. It's a really fun set. Let me just show you what it looks like, because it is so fun, basically. Boop. Here it is. And when you light attack, this essence gets drawn out of them. You stand in it, and then you've got the Essence Thief buff, which is this glowing blue, and it increases your damage done by 10% for 10 seconds. It's really strong, and it's a lot of fun too. And of course, the Essence Thief will buff Poisonous Serpent, just like Spriggans does. Having Essence Thief on your bar will buff Poisonous Serpent. So, kind of cool. The reason I can't commit to it is because it can be a little bit finicky. What is cool is that if you light attack bar swap, you can proc it from range and then run in and get it. So that's kind of neat too. But you can't always pick up this proc. If you're in a tower, sometimes it goes over the edge of the tower. So you have to jump down to get it. Sometimes, like, you're running away from someone, you light attack them, and the proc goes backwards, and you just have to keep running. You have to, like, give it up. Then you have 10 seconds without it. That can be a bummer. And it's just sort of one of those things where there's a little bit of luck involved. And I don't love things that have a little bit of luck involved. Sometimes you're fighting someone and, like, you know, you're fighting, and it just goes right to you like that. Like, you're in range still, you're just breathing in and out, and you just pick it up automatically, and it just works so well. You get a little buff to your health, get a little buff to your stamina, you're doing more damage, it's great. And then sometimes it goes the other way, and you're just not going to get it, and you've lost it. And so, I don't know, a little finicky. I like it, it's a lot of fun, but it has its caveats. I've been playing around with it, and while I do enjoy it, I honestly haven't gotten to test it to the fullest because I don't have infused weapon damage jewelry that I want to have. So working on getting that. In the meantime, I've just been using, like, sort of the purple jewelry, and I've got 2 infused pieces, and it's just not perfect yet. I'm working on getting gold Venomous Ophidian so that I can run Venomous Ophidian jewelry, which I should have, but I just have been lazy. I only have 1 ring left. I'll get to try it eventually soon. And then I think Essence Thief, I'll like it a little bit more. It might close that gap for me, because right now I'm really on the fence about it, and maybe having perfect jewelry will change my mind and make it more favorable. But anyways, I do recommend trying it out. It's a pain in the butt to farm, but it's worth it. It is really cool. And it works on everything. So, I like it. Let's see, anything else? So traits and weights. I run 5 medium, 2 heavy, and the reason that I run 5 medium, 2 heavy, let me just put this set back on. The reason that I run 5 medium on the body and 2 heavy is because of a passive in the shadow tree. So paying attention to your passives is a really good thing, but basically Shadow Barrier. When you cast a Shadow ability, you gain major resolve and ward for 6 seconds, and it's increased by 25% for every piece of heavy armor that you have. So when you have 2 pieces of heavy armor, you get 9 seconds. And for someone who's, you know, somewhat brawly and doesn't have the most magical recovery, that's really important. So being able to turn invisible and have 9 seconds, you can see it in the bottom left corner there. That is my major resolve timer. And being able to have 9 seconds of major resolve and major ward is really important. It's really important. Not to mention that I don't think... Yeah, I mean, basically you're trading 2% stats from having a light piece for 2 seconds of Shadow Barrier. And to me, that's just a no-brainer. Shadow Barrier is way better. Plus, you get a higher armor rating because you're running 2 heavy instead of 1 heavy, 1 light. So, for traits, again, I'm running all tri-stat. I'm sorry. For glyphs, I'm running all tri-stat. And that's just because I need as much health and magicka as possible. And tri-stat is the most efficient way to do that. In fact, if you feel like you don't need as much damage and you really need more health, I would actually switch one of these infused for a triune trait. That's an option. Now, I like to run 4 impen and 3 well-fitted, but that's just another preference. I feel like you could run more well-fitted if you want to rely more on rolling and using abilities and that cost reduction for like sprinting and rolling. And you can rely more on impen if you want to be a little bit brawlier and you don't want to roll so much, or that's just not part of your playstyle. Both work. Both are totally functional. Do whatever you want there. I personally find myself using 4 impen and 3 well-fitted just because it suits my playstyle, and I found it to be most optimal. It gives me a ton of options. I'm not too squishy, and I don't run out of stamina, and that's all you need. So, let's see. Some sets that I don't like in open world, so this is, yeah, okay, bear with me. I don't like New Moon Acolyte in open world. And the main reason is because 5% is really noticeable. 5% debuff to your, like, basically a 5% cost increase to all of your abilities, including sprinting and rolling, is not ideal. And you can say, oh, well, for one, you should never roll on your front bar. Well, sure, but then you're limiting your options. No more roll canceling offensive abilities, which sometimes you need to do and sometimes is really great. Not to mention that rolling is a huge part of being a wood elf because you get a buff to your penetration when you roll. So I don't want to commit and be able to say, hey, I'm never ever going to roll on my front bar. And you don't have to. You can still do it sometimes, but that cost increase, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel it all across the board when you're on your front bar. I do think it's better for Nightblades in a lot of ways than other classes because our abilities aren't super expensive, at least the stamina ones. They're not the worst, but they're certainly not the best either. It also doesn't give you a lot of stamina to play with, which is fine, but I feel like it's a set that, first of all, it's only going to be good if you don't have to change your recovery at all. Like, if you're running New Moon Acolyte, but you're throwing an infused recovery glyph onto your jewelry to, like, compensate for that 5%, then there's no point. You've wasted it. So don't do that for sure. If you're going to use New Moon Acolyte, try to do it without changing your recovery at all. And that's tough. The situations where it really excels are one-on-ones. Like in dueling, it's really strong. When you can control the variables, you know exactly the situation you're going to be in. You're going to be fighting one other person. You can kind of fine-tune the build and change how much things cost. You can afford to play defensively because you know what you're defending against exactly. When you're 1vxing or you're out in open world, there are a lot more variables. There are a lot more things that you have to account for, and so having a cost increase thrown into those situations is a lot more volatile. So I really don't like it in open world for that reason. But I don't think it's a bad set, right? It's a good set, but I don't think it's a better setup than what I currently use. Hopefully that explains that. If you have any questions, like, feel free to ask me. But if you're struggling, if you're trying New Moon Acolyte, cool. If you're struggling with sustain, I'm not too surprised. Some people are going to pull it off. Some people are just not going to like it. I run really low stamina recovery, so I don't like having any changes, especially negative changes. And if I'm going to put in more stamina recovery to compensate, then I've already lost. There's no point. I also don't like it because it doesn't buff Poisonous Serpent. So if I was going to use it, I'd have to swap out Poisonous Serpent, and that's a rough thing to do. Poisonous Serpent is a really, really good set with very few caveats, because the only caveat that there is that you have to have a poison it damage ability on someone, and since I'm using the Master Bow, so Poison Arrow's always up, that's a great combo. It fits really well. It's a natural part of the playstyle, so I don't really have to change anything to compensate for this caveat, where with New Moon Acolyte, I would have to change my playstyle to compensate, or at least my build around a lot. No, my playstyle. That's the problem. Changing your build isn't a problem, but changing the way that you use resources is a bigger problem. And so, yeah. Okay, well, that's that. So, next, abilities. I changed a lot of abilities. For one, and the main reason I changed my abilities is because, A, it's fun to change abilities all the time. And so, in open world, this has been a ton of fun. I don't think it's going to be the best ability setup for every situation, but if you're running around alone, or like with one other friend, this is a super fun thing to try. Now, what makes it dangerous is that I don't have any snare removal, and instead I'm using Shadow Image, but I'll talk about that. Let's just go through it. First of all, my playstyle now involves a lot more of jumping in and out of combat. I don't have snare removal, so I can't move around quite as freely. So I'm basically, instead of moving around, like using my feet, I'm just jumping in and out, gap closing in, shade poofing out. And so to facilitate that, I'm using Ambush. Ambush is great. The Empower is noticeable. Not that noticeable, but it's noticeable. And then Minor Vulnerability is awesome because it will also buff Poisonous Serpent. So that's basically a 16% buff to Poisonous Serpent, and that is awesome. You feel that for sure. Next is Relentless. Relentless is so wonderful this patch. They removed the minimum travel distance, or sorry, minimal travel time that there used to be on this ability. So it used to be you'd charge it up, you'd fire it, and if you were too close, it would like delay. And it was so annoying, especially since they're trying to incentivize using it at close range by giving you a heal, but then de-incentivize it by putting this crazy, weird, like, cast time delay thing on it. It was just, it felt laggy and sloppy all the time. That's fixed. No more minimum travel time. I love it. It's so much more fun now. So definitely use this if you're not already. Also, the defense that it gives you is kind of nice. Rally, no longer hot, obviously, but it gives you minor endurance. So great. Okay, now everyone has minor endurance. Like, that's not going to change how people use the ability, but whatever's off. Surprise attack, the spammable, definitely like sort of the one to use in between combos, and the shredding armor is kind of nice. Be conscious of it. Try and flank enemies, just like while you're fighting them, strafe around them. It doesn't hurt you to do. It can push people off target, and most importantly, it's going to lower their resistance, which is great because that'll buff all your damage, including Poisonous Serpent, of course. I'm still using an Execute. I just really like Executes. Killer's Blade is still the better Execute, but the two-handed Executioner is a lot of fun, right? It's not a better Execute. It has worse passives and worse damage at 25%, but it is a beautiful move, super fun to cancel, super fun to use, and you can execute people from higher ranges. I don't really think that's necessary because even with Killer's Blade, when I get a light attack, I often get a Poisonous Serpent proc, and so I can still execute people from 30% regularly, even tankier people, because getting a light attack crit and a Poisonous Serpent proc is not very hard to do, and if you get one of those on your light attack, then you're going to soften them up quite a bit. So you can take off 5% of their health that way, and then Killer's Blade for the kill, and it's super effective. In cap, I still like in cap for the passives. The cast time sucks. I hate cast times on ults. Please remove them, but on all ults, man, no ults should have cast times. That's just the worst. Berserker Strike is a good option too. This is unmorphed because I don't use it very often. Not a huge fan of it. I definitely prefer in-cap for the passives and Reeve, which is really helpful. But, you know, suit yourself. Shadowy Disguise, I like being invisible. I don't like the heal version of this, especially in medium armor, not worth using. Leeching Strikes is just another hot, so it really helps me to be defensive, which is extra important now that I don't have Troll King. It's also a great form of stamina recovery, so it allows me to run lower stamina recovery and higher damage. So I basically give up an ability slot to get the healing and the recovery that I need to run more damage. So good stuff. It also plays into the playstyle of attacking and putting on pressure, because you basically regain stamina by attacking. So it's really nice. Shadow Image is so fun. I love Shadow Image. If you've never played with it before, definitely play with it. Like, try it at least once. In this case, I've actually replaced Shuffle because I just feel like snares are not as prevalent. Someone mentioned that to me, and I started running around without Shuffle, and I've been getting away with it pretty well, and I don't mind. So it works just fine. I feel like it's definitely better than Shuffle in duels, and since it's totally operable open world, it's a great ability. It's really great for like kiting, getting out of combat, but it's also great for general mobility in a 1v1, because now that I don't have snare removal, poofing back to my shade, super helpful, and then I can just ambush back. So even if I'm snared, I still have a ton of mobility in a 1v1 situation. Getting locked down is a little more dangerous, but as long as you practice having your Shadow Image up all the time, it's really not a problem. This is the big change this patch. I've switched from Poison Injection to Venom Arrow. Venom Arrow is so fun. The damage difference is not as high as it used to be. They buffed the base damage of this ability and lowered the influence of the execution portion of poison injection. So poison injection is worse than it's ever been. Not bad, still very good, but worse than it's been. And Venom Arrow has just kind of risen back into prominence for me because it's such a great utility ability. It does so many things. Interrupting casting abilities is a big deal. You're going to be able to interrupt reses, you're going to interrupt dark deals, snipes, all sorts of things that are just so annoying, and it's hilarious. It also costs less than poison injection. Not a lot less, but it's noticeable. When you're spamming like poison injection on the back bar and you switch to Venom Arrow, you really do notice the difference. It's a lot more sustainable, especially when you cast it like eight or 9 times in a row just to put on pressure. So that's a lot of fun, especially because when I'm spamming it, I'm usually just doing it to soften them up, and poison injection's extra damage doesn't come into effect until the bottom half of their health pool. So my normal use case for Venom Arrow and poison injection better suits Venom Arrow because I kind of use it as a spammy way to get a fight going and to put on pressure with Poisonous Serpent. Vigor on the back bar. Vigor is absolutely necessary, of course. It's the only hot we have now, I guess, besides Leeching Strikes, but that still requires... This is the only passive hot that we have now, so you cast it, and then it heals you for 4 seconds. Definitely an ability to have on your bar. For back bar ults, currently using Temporal Guard. Bow ulti, Ballista is another really fun one, and I also like Werewolf from time to time. Getting a little bit of extra stamina recovery on the back bar is good. I used to really like Soul Siphon. I don't like it now. 0.5 second cast time that they put on it is really neutered it in a lot of ways. You can't roll dodge cancel it anymore, so it's not nearly as effective of a burst heal. While you're casting it, people can still kill you. So if you're in a panic situation and you want to use Soul Siphon as your panic ability, you can get executed as you're casting it before you use it, and that just has destroyed its viability in as a defensive ultimate. So definitely better to run Temporal Guard. I rarely use the ult because it's still broken, so sometimes you'll click the button and it just won't rewind you, and that is a bummer. But sometimes it's great. You can get a crazy clip, but I use it as an absolute last resort because it won't work sometimes, and that sucks. But the Minor Protection is a very strong passive, so I love having that, and that's why I use that on my back bar. But if you're struggling with sustain, the first thing I would try is putting on a Werewolf instead to see if you can play around with jumping in and then jumping out and sitting on your bow bar for just 1 or 2 more ticks to get that extra stamina recovery. So that's it for abilities. For potions, I'm actually using same old Essence of Weapon Crit. I've tried running, instead of Essence Crit, I tried swapping out my Killer's Blade for some Fighters Guild stuff. Mainly Camel Hunter. Camel Hunter gives you the crit damage at all times, and also gives you Minor Berserk, which is really cool because you're trying to flank people anyways with surprise attack. And so it's pretty easy to get that Minor Berserk if you're used to doing that. And the Minor Berserk helps all your damage, including Poisonous Serpent. So obviously that's a big draw for me. But giving up, and the weapon damage passives are nice, but giving up Killer's Blade just felt like a little bit too much. Playing around with it, I really missed having Killer's Blade. Even with the extra damage, which is nice, against tankier targets, you want something to finish them. You want to be able to delete them. And Killer's Blade is basically a 25% health debuff. And Camo Hunter just isn't. It just isn't as good. But it is cool. And if you are used to playing without an execute, or you are not fighting as tanky enemies, go for it. Like, it's a great ability, and it's got great passives. Being part of Fighters Guild is really nice, but I just ended up not loving it that much. CP, I'm going to talk about just really briefly, but for the most part, I've got all my CP in a spreadsheet that I will link in the description, so you can check that out for more details. The spreadsheet gives some details as well. 56 Ironclad, a little bit of Spell Shield, a little bit of Medium Armor Focus. These are basically sinks, just because everything rounds down. So crit resistance, resistant is 58 because I'm running 4 pieces of Impen. Ironclad 56, Thick Skin 56, I might be able to bring this down a little bit because dots are less prevalent, but it's still really nice. And a lot of the toughest people to fight still use dots, like Magicka DKs are still going to put dots on you. There's still dots in the game, right? They're not as strong, but thick-skinned is still really nice. And then having Unchained is priceless. So if I was to take out thick-skinned, I'd probably have to put it into Hardy and Ally Defender. And I'm just not sure that that's worth the trade yet. Quick recovery, a little bit of 32 points into that. 1 point in a Siphoner. It's one more thing that enemies have to purge, and it'll proc your Reef passive on in-cap. So that's kind of cool. Warlord, a little bit at 20% there for breaking free. A tiny bit into Sprinter, a tiny bit into Bash Focus. I put 120 points into these stars to get Wind Running. Wind Running is super strong. These stars are not that great. They're good, but eh. So 56 Mooncalf, 49 Healthy, 15 Arcanist. I'm thinking about trading these around. Normally I'll put 49 into Healthy if I'm using Troll King, and 49 into Arcanist if I'm not. Right now I'm not using Troll King, but it's not that big of a deal. So I've just left it as is. 56 into Tumbling, 20 into Shadow Ward for those block cost reduction. And then damage. I'm using the Tactician as my primary stun, so that's a big part of my playstyle right now. When you roll dodge, you set people off balance, and that's a big deal. Before you hit them, they take that extra 20 or 10% damage. So if you've hit them with ambush, you've dodged an ability, and you are able to land an in-cap, your Relentless can do like 46% more damage, and it's nutty. It's so funny. So you can absolutely like delete people, and all of that extra damage also contributes to Poisonous Serpent, whereas like weapon damage doesn't. So that's where Tactician really comes in handy. Not to mention it is a stun that's part of your heavy attack, so it doesn't have its own global cooldown, which means that you can guarantee a hit after it. So you can sort of medium attack to knock someone over, and then you can do a combo on them that's going to land. Well, you can do an ability that's going to land, and then a lot of times you can get them as they come back up. And if there's someone who's really rolly, you just delay for a second, and then you catch them at the end of the roll. And it's super effective and a lot of fun. So to get the 120 here, I put 81 into Mastered Arms, 39 into Physical Weapon Expert. For the final tree, I have 20 into Thaumaturge. I might take a little bit of this out, but I use 2 really strong dots. Venom Arrow is still a really strong dot. It's not as good as Poison Injection, but it's good and deserves a little bit of a buff. And then I also use double dot poisons. So Thaumaturge, still getting some use out of it, but it's I might bring it down a couple percentage points. 61 Precise Strikes, 56 Mighty, 13 Piercing. Piercing is the sink. It's good to have, but it's not a super effective star and doesn't scale really well. So I use this for all my leftover points. And that basically does it. That's the whole build. If you have any questions about the build, stats, the playstyle, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Oh, you know what? One more little thing. I did forget to talk about my other potions. They're not a big deal, but might as well cover them. Because I'm not using Camo Hunter, I still use Essence of Weapon Crit, which gives you Major Savagery, Health, and Stamina. In my opinion, these are the best pot in the game. They give you the most for your money. And actually, speaking of money, they're relatively cheap compared to like tripods. You make them using, people ask me this all the time, so I've started memorizing it, but if you're on PC, you just use like a potion crafting mod, and that's how I make all my potions. But it uses Mountain Flower, Dragon Thorn, and Water Hyacinth. So with those 3 powers combined, you get the best pot in the game, and they're relatively inexpensive, so that's nice. I also do use tripods for things, but not very often. I don't find that I need the Magicka that much, but when you do need it, it is helpful to have these on hand, especially if you're stuck playing super defensively. And then I also use Detect pots that give me Major Savagery and Detect. I like pairing these two because when I am about to detect someone, I plan on killing them, and the Major Savagery just helps finish the job there. So they're a good pot to have on hand too. So I just keep them here, here, and here, and that works for me. Then I have some extra tripods and some stem trash pots because sometimes you need those too. But there we go. That's the whole build now. Now if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. And at the end of this video, I'm going to link the gameplay and I'll also link the gameplay video in the description below. Anyways, with that all being said, you guys have a great night, and I'll see you in Cyrodiil.